She was born among the Mongolian nobility, but her choices helped decide whether the Qing Empire would survive its first crisis. This woman, known as Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang, became one of the most influential figures in early Qing China. Today, we step into the tomb of this 17th century powerhouse of Chinese history and uncover the political impact she left behind and the story of how she was laid to rest. The Eastern Qing Tombs lie in Zhonghua, Hebei province, just about 70 kilometers from Beijing, China's capital. Here rest 5 Qing emperors: Shunzhi, Kangxi, Qianlong, Xianfeng, and Tongzhi, along with countless empresses, consorts, princesses, and even emperor princes. And yet, the Shunzhi Emperor's mother, Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang, is not buried among them. Her tomb stands off to the east of the main gate of the necropolis. Why was such a powerful woman laid to rest outside the imperial burial grounds? To answer that, we have to start with her childhood. On March 28, 1613, a baby girl was born on the Khorchin Steppe in what is now Eastern Inner Mongolia, China. Her father, Zhaoxi, was prince of the Khorchin Mongols, ruling his own people on the steppe with little direct interference from the Ming court. Zhaoxi was regarded as a descendant of Khazar, the full brother of Genghis Khan, which meant that in this little girl ran the bloodline of the same golden family as Genghis Khan himself. At that time, in the Khorchin lands of Inner Mongolia, Tibetan Buddhism was already spreading rapidly. This little girl grew up in that intense religious atmosphere, where compassion and mercy were held up as the highest virtues. Her father gave this little girl the name Bumubutai. It's a striking old Mongolian word that has an auspicious meaning, a heaven-sent noble one. In her case, that blessing was not just a pretty wish. She really did change the course of Chinese history. Even today, Bumubutai still has countless admirers in China. The Hada scarves laid in front of her spirit Way and Stele Pavillion are the clearest proof of that. Strictly speaking, this is an Empress Mausoleum built to the standards of an Emperor's Mausoleum. The clearest sign is right at the entrance, the spirit Way and Stele Pavillion. The building that once sheltered the stele has long since collapsed. Today, only the stone tablet remains, standing by in the wind. After more than 3 centuries of sun, rain, and weathering, the original inscription in Manchu, Mongolian, and Chinese has almost completely vanished. Yet once, every line on this stone recorded the full list of Bumubutai's honors and titles. In 1625, the 13-year-old girl named Bumubutai left the Khorchin Steppe and traveled to Mukden, today's Shenyang, escorted by her elder brother Wu Keshan. She was given in marriage to Huang Taiji, the 34-year-old fourth son of Nuerhachi, Khan of the Qing Khanate. This ambitious prince would soon push his frontier Khanate onto the road to becoming the Qing Empire. Marriage alliances with the Mongol nobility were already a core state strategy for this young Manchu region, and they would remain one of the basic tools of Qing politics for generations to come. In 1636, Huang Taiji proclaimed the founding of the Great Qing Empire and became its first emperor. In 1643, Huang Taiji passed away. In 1644, the Ming capital of Beijing was captured by peasant rebel armies, and the Qing forces later defeated them. Bumubutai then took her 6-year-old son Fuling, now the Shunzhi Emperor, to Beijing. On the first day of the 10th lunar month in 1644, the Shunzhi Emperor held a grand enthronement ceremony in Beijing. formally proclaiming himself Emperor of China. From that moment on, Bumubutai became the Empress Dowager who presided over the empire. The woman later generations would know as Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang. On either side of the main gate, the Gate of Longan, there used to be the usual east and west side house, the kitchens that prepared Manchu-style offerings for the departed emperor and empress. Today, those buildings have mostly collapsed, leaving only broken walls and traces. In her life at Beijing, Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang was famous for being frugal, restrained, and deeply compassionate. She constantly pushed for a simpler, less wasteful way of life inside the palace. In the 1650s, when disasters struck across the empire, she personally took 150,000 tiles of silver out of her own household funds to support relief efforts, roughly on the order of $10 million in today's money. Today, the so-called Longan Gate that serves as the main entrance to the tomb is already in ruins. The original structure is gone, and what you see now is just a rough brick wall standing in its place. In Chinese, Longan literally means summer imperial grace. It's a name reserved for spaces that embody the emperor's favor. In a typical imperial mausoleum, the Longan Gate would open directly toward the Longan Hall behind it. But if you peek through the keyhole of the iron gate here, what you see right behind it is not a hall at all, it's 3 glazed-tile gates in a row. The Longan Hall is pushed much further back beyond those glazed gates. This layout is completely different from most other royal tombs. So what is the unusual design trying to tell us? What secret is it hiding? In 1661, the Shunzhi Emperor died at just 23 years old. After his death, Xiaozhuang's 8-year-old grandson, Xuanye, was placed on the throne, the boy who would later become the Kangxi Emperor. As Xuanye grew up, Bumubutai Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang put her energy into him. She taught him that a ruler should be benevolent and treat his subjects with compassion. On major state affairs, Xuanye often turned to her for guidance. But Xiaozhuang also knew when to step back, and she deliberately let him make his own decisions. That balance of advice and freedom helped train the young emperor's ability to rule on his own. So where exactly did Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang live inside the Forbidden City? On the western side of the inner court, there is a palace complex called Qing Palace. She lived there as a devout Buddhist. She had the main hall of Qing Palace converted into a Buddhist chapel to show her piety, and moved herself into the grand eastern side hall instead. In the 26th year of Kangxi's reign, in early 1688, Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang was already gravely ill, confined to bed in the eastern side hall of Qing Palace, inside the Forbidden City. On the 25th day of the 12th lunar month, January 27th, in the Western calendar, she passed away there at the age of 75. In the months before her death, her grandson, the 34-year-old Kangxi Emperor, stayed almost constantly at her bedside. He personally pored over medical texts, summoned physicians, prepared herbal medicine, and even brought the decoctations to his grandmother with his own hands. At one point, this young emperor walked from the Forbidden City to the Temple of Heaven, praying to the Lord of Heaven and offering to trade years of his own life if only his grandmother could live another decade or two. But no prayer could stop the advance of illness. Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang passed away peacefully in Qing Palace. After Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang passed away, it took only a few months for her imperial coffin to be sent to the Eastern Qing Tombs. There, it was placed temporarily in a small courtyard outside the spiritual wall of the Eastern Qing Tombs, the very spot where Zhaoxi Mausoleum stands today. Wanting his grandmother to live in the afterlife as she had in life, the Kangxi Emperor ensured a remarkable order. The entire eastern side hall of Qing Palace in the Forbidden City, the very hall where Xiaozhuang had spent her final years and drawn her last breath, was to be dismantled piece by piece, transported to the Eastern Qing Tombs, and rebuilt exactly as it was. This reconstructed hall became the main building of the temporary resting palace that housed her coffin. In Soviet photos from the 1930s, we can still clearly see this house standing on the central axis of Zhaoxi Mausoleum. In the 1960s, this grand hall was lost in a failed dismantle and preserve project and was never rebuilt. Historically, this relocated palace building also took on the role of the Longen Hall for Zhaoxi Mausoleum. On either side of this Longen Hall, there were also a pair of side halls. The western side hall served as a chanting hall where Tibetan Buddhist lamas recited sutras and performed rituals for Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang's soul and for the peace of the realm. These too echoed the way she had lived in Beijing. Inside the Forbidden City, Xiaozhuang often organized the copying and recitation of Buddhist scriptures at court, dedicating the marriage to relief from droughts, famines, and epidemics, hoping that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would protect ordinary people and ease their suffering. The way Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang was laid to rest in the Longen Hall was highly unusual. Her coffin was placed directly in the very center of the main hall, instead of being lowered into an underground palace and sealed beneath a burial mound, as was customary for Chinese emperors and empresses. Her coffin simply stayed there above ground inside the hall for more than 30 years. That alone tells us this arrangement was always meant to be temporary. The reason for this makeshift arrangement runs much deeper. By the time Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang passed away, the Qing court had already abandoned the old Manchu custom of cremating the body and placing the ashes in an urn. Instead, they had fully shifted to the Han Chinese system of inhumation, burying the whole body in a coffin on the ground. Xiaozhuang herself also did not wish to be cremated. She wanted her body to be laid in a full coffin and buried intact. But that created a serious problem. It meant she could no longer easily be moved back to Shunzhi, the old capital of Shenyang, to be buried together with her husband Huang Taiji in Zhaoling Mausoleum. The underground palace and ritual layout of Zhaoling had already been designed for cremated remains, not for full-sized imperial coffins. Xiaozhuang clearly foresaw how awkward her burial would become, so in her final will she proposed a compromise. She would not return to Zhaoling Mausoleum in Shunzhi, but instead be buried close to Xiaoling Mausoleum beside her son, the Shunzhi Emperor, so she could continue to watch over both her son and grandson in the afterlife. The Kangxi Emperor, famous in Chinese history for his filial piety, honored this wish after her death. He rebuilt the east side hall of Qing Palace next to Xiaoling and placed her coffin there only as a temporary resting place. But for Kangxi, the real dilemma never went away. On one side stood ancestral precedent and ritual law, on the other his grandmother's last wish and his own refusal to cremate a loved one again. And even by the 61st year of his reign, when Kangxi himself passed away, the question of Xiaozhuang's final burial still remained unresolved. And because the entire palace hall was moved out from the Forbidden City, the three arch gates that once stood in front of it were moved together with it. Resembled here, they became the triple glazed-tile gate we see today in front of Zhaoxi Mausoleum. In other words, those three beautiful glazed gates at the entrance of Zhaoxi Mausoleum aren't native to this mausoleum at all. They are immigrants from the Forbidden City in Beijing. In 1722, Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang's grandson, the Kangxi Emperor, also passed away. His fourth son, Prince Yongzheng, inherited the throne and became the Yongzheng Emperor. In the third year of his reign, 1725, Yongzheng decided this could no longer be delayed. To finally let his great-grandmother's spirit rest in peace, he ordered a full imperial mausoleum to be built directly on the basis of the hall that had been holding her coffin. That construction is what turned this site into the Zhaoxi Mausoleum we know today. Only then did its layout truly take on the form of a complete Qing Imperial tomb. Because of the rules of generational hierarchy, the main Eastern Qing Tombs necropolis, centered on her son, the Shunzhi Emperor, was effectively reserved for him, his descendants, and their consorts. So instead of moving Xiaozhuang elsewhere, the court simply turned the temporary resting place of her coffin into an independent complex, the Zhaoxi Mausoleum we see today. To show extra respect and to strengthen its defenses, they even wrapped this small princess cage in an additional ring of walls. As a result, the Zhaoxi Mausoleum ended up with two concentric walls around the mausoleum buildings, making it a complete one-of-a-kind among all Qing Imperial mausoleums. What you are seeing at the very back of the mausoleum, the squared walled terrace with its sole tower, the huge earthen mound on top and the enclosing wall around it. It was all built in the third year of Yongzheng's reign in 1725. In the very center of that sole tower stands a massive stone stela. Its inscription marks the imperial tomb as belonging to Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang herself, and beneath the great mound, roughly 30 meters underground, lies her underground palace, the final resting place of Botai. Today, Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang's underground palace is sealed and can no longer be opened. But because this is a burial chamber of an empress, we can make a reasonable reconstruction by looking at another famous woman's tomb, the late 19th century autocrat, Empress Dowager Cixi. In the Qing Dynasty, an emperor's underground palace was usually divided into three sections: a front chamber, a middle chamber, and a rear chamber. For an empress, the design was simpler: only a front and a rear chamber, with a middle chamber omitted. On a massive stone bier in that rear chamber, Xiaozhuang's coffin would have lain in silence. Centuries later, tomb raiders finally set their eyes on the imperial burial ground. Around 1927, as the Kuomintang, Chinese Nationalist Party, gained the upper hand in North China, the old Qing loyalist forces responsible for guarding the Eastern Qing Tombs were disbanded. In 1928, a warlord unit had joined the nationalist side, marched into the Eastern Qing Tombs under the pretext of military exercises, and carried out large-scale looting of imperial tombs. From then on, the whole cemetery complex was essentially wide open. In April 1933, it was Zhaoxi Mausoleum's turn. Raiders broke into the underground palace, and entered the real chamber. They stole the grave goods, even lifted off the coffin lid, and the Empress Dowager Xiaozhuang's remains were thrown onto the floor, scattered and broken. Later, the deposed Qing Imperial family organized a clean-up and reburial in the underground palace of Zhaoxi. According to local accounts, to observe strict separation between men and women, the work was entrusted to a group of Manchu band-women. They carefully gathered up the bones, placed them back into the coffin, and set the lid straight again. Every movement saw men not daring to show the slightest disrespect. From that time on, the underground palace of Zhaoxi Mausoleum has never been opened again. Xiaozhuang was one of the most remarkable female political leaders of the 17th century, and the Hada's hanging before her spirit Way Stele still show how Chinese people today continue to remember her kindness and wisdom. In the next episode, we will visit the tomb of her daughter-in-law, Empress Xiaozhuang, from the same clan as Xiaozhuang at the Xiaodong Mausoleum, the first fully formal imperial mausoleum ever built for an empress in Qing China history, and see what that tomb really looked like. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.